The particular story I'm going to voice isn't necessarily the one I have, which is full of that horrifying fear factor, but it was such a strange and surreal event, which has stuck with me to this day. Anyway, onward. My name is Paul, and I live in a small East Coast state of America called Maryland. Mostly, it's insignificant in terms of this country as a whole. Around 12 or 13 years ago, in a time before smartphones' prevalence, where every phone came with GPS navigation as a standard, and in the infancy of Google Maps. Actually, during the time this story takes place, I was using directions written from MapQuest, as I hadn't even assimilated to Google Maps yet. I was on my way to a job interview. Where the job interview was to take place is mostly incoincidental to the benefit of the story, which is good because I can't recall its location anyway. However, while driving down a popular byroad in the area, usually heavily congested for a small road, given it's the main ingress and egress to the international airport, which happens to be in my area, I misread my directions and performed a wrong turn, which has led me astray from my predestined route. I remember the road I turned down was a 2-lane road, which wound through the woods in such a sporadic progression of turns that it felt like I was doing donuts. No hills, just flat ground, trees, twists and turns. It seemed an eternity upon this same path, driving ever further away from the serenity of familiar surroundings, with no sign of the ability for a U-turn. So, on I drove, in silence, stealing glimpses from my directions, which portrayed a small map of the area of my destination, to see if I could notice the all-encompassing forest which was sheltering me. But before I could glean too much from the image, I rounded a sharp turn, and the heavens greeted me as the trees suddenly receded upon a scene of a series of high-rise buildings clustered together. I received such a shock from the contrasting divergence of scenery that I only blew through the stop sign, which rapidly approached, which I rectified by jamming on the brakes, and came to a stop after a short alarming screech. From the vantage point of the stopped vehicle, I had a moment to appraise this new scenario for which I found myself. The oncoming road for which I stopped upon was a 2-lane road and ended pressed up to a 1-lane circle. The intersection of these two paths was the stop sign where I was stopped. The 1-lane road was a circle which wrapped around the unconventional and business park from the stop sign. Around the buildings, which seemed to encompass an internal area of approximately, from a quick estimation from the stationary spot, 4 city blocks, and came back to the road I was on, going in the opposite direction. This meant that I would need to travel the circle in order to lawfully make my exit, and I must admit, albeit somewhat sheepishly, I wanted to travel so that I could explore this place. The thing that struck me, besides the abnormal placement for such a grandiose example of commerce, was the fact that for several minutes I'd been sitting at the stop sign. I hadn't seen a single pedestrian or car, nothing parked on the street, nothing driving, not even another random passerby who'd been turned around much as I had been. It was like a forgotten relic, made completely new. The concrete was pristine, the paint on the roadways and curbs was fresh. Benches on the sidewalk, made of wooden slates, painted in beauty emerald. If this complex was abandoned, it had to have been just abandoned. But I shook my head to dispel the reverb of my observations and completed the right turn to place me in the circle so that I could make my exit from these surreal surroundings. Things progressed as normally, driving a steady 25 miles per hour through this ghost town. Performing my left turns to travel the road in order to make my departure was mundane enough until I got to the backside. After my second left, which placed my vehicle on the back portion of the loop, I saw an obstruction in the street, about halfway down the block. The obstruction was a sight which I took to be common enough, being a bright yellow school bus, but its position was something which had vexed me. The full-size school bus was pulled across the street, so that the engine compartment was sitting over the top of the curb, causing the large vehicle to sit perpendicular to the sidewalk lining the mouths of the office buildings. Essentially, the school bus was a highly effective roadblock, which undermined the flow of traffic, although the only traffic was myself, the last man on earth as it seemed. As I approached the congestion, I slowed my vehicle to a snail's pace and allowed my eyes to cascade over the bus which barred my procession. It was at this moment, as I was enthralled with the reasoning for parking a transport vehicle for the innocent in such a fashion, movement was taking place to my car's left. The tall buildings, which had been silent sentinels for this basin to business, were suddenly teeming with individuals, flooding from the revolving doors like a blasphemous plague, whose sole attention was resting solely on my small green automobile. It took me by surprise. Figures of all different shapes and sizes, although all Caucasian to a degree, which made them seem unnatural in their pallor, wearing robes made of an almost translucent material, gossamer and white, as it clad their forms, barely covering their nudity, assailing me with its brilliant tones in comparison to the drab state of the grey concrete buildings. Anxiety struck me, seizing me in place as the crowd grew. The mob approaching, pointing, vocalizing sounds which didn't resemble English as I'd ever heard it before. It was a shriek, a high-pitched, alarming shriek, which reverberated from an epic centre in the distance, possibly from one of the buildings, but it was enough to grant me the predilection to survive whatever sort of situation I had found myself. My car was slammed into reverse. The tires spun as the sudden movement caused them to lose their grip on the earth. The sudden cacophony of rubber on asphalt caused a pause to filter through the approaching horde, like a wave of paralysis which hadn't survived long enough to be effective. But I hadn't the time to spend much time considering the effects of the noise on these individuals, because I needed to flee, and quickly. There wasn't much distance between myself and the buildings from which these people were coming, so my time was short, until they reached me and wrenched their way into my vehicle to rent my soul from their mortal flesh. After giving myself about 5 feet of distance to the bus, my car was placed into the drive. The wheel was cut to the right and I sped off to get around the roadblock, up and over the curb, through the glass, and approximately 6 inches from a large sign my car had swerved, effectively and thankfully avoiding all the dangers of such an insensible manoeuvre. From that point, and to the chorus of despair wailing from the assembly to my rear, I sped out of the loop as quickly as possible and never looked back. I sped down the winding road back to my original point of improper directing and was soon home. I thought that would be the end of it, but there was always a kernel of curiosity in the back of my head about the whole situation and the strange congregation for which I was almost well acquainted with. Perhaps half morbid curiosity, another half were the effects of an imp of the perverse. But I had considered retracing my steps and attempting to find this complex once again. or search out any form of information about the complex. Something for the sense of closure. But a few weeks after my run-in at the Forest complex, I received a letter with no return address or name on it. Just my information. Curiosity got the better of me, since I did have a pen pal at that point in my life. However, upon opening the simple white envelope, my gaze was met with a photo of my license plate, with 3 words, written in a scrawling script in dark red ink. The words read, "Don't come back." I decided to let the mystery alone after that. Update. In the time since I wrote down this story, I've come to find out that there is a cult, which operates out of Laurel, Maryland, called the Brotherhood of Satan. I have no idea if these things are related, but it gave me pause to know that these sorts of things existed around me.
Hey guys, this story was written by a very talented Bella viewer named Layman. You may have noticed that this is a re-edit and re-upload of a viewer submission I uploaded previously. I am going to re-edit and re-upload the stories that Paul has written and create a video series dedicated to his works. I will also be adding his future works to this video series. He is a very talented writer, and I would like to show my support to him. You can read his works on his Wattpad profile, the link for which can be found in the description below.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. So until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.